Hello.
Hi.
Hi. We're having a conversation today, and I'm going to introduce you to Randy Martinez. He's going to explain a little bit about what he does for a job. And I thought it would be interesting to interview you today because you said that you were a former MLL student, so you came up through the school system in America, but at first you are a multilingual learner. Right?
Right.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Gabrielle, for inviting me to chat with you. So I'm what's called the Chief Equity and Social Impact Officer for Global for Pizza Hut Corporation. So I hope all of you are reading books through the Book It program and redeeming your certificate for reading a book and getting a personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut. But it's one of the programs that I run to make sure that children, are picking up books and reading and getting inspired. But that's one of the things that I do for Pizza Hut. And then I also run the Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Initiative globally, which focuses on ensuring that we create equitable opportunities for men, women, people of color, so that they have an equal opportunity to grow within a company and be successful. And so if we do that correctly, then my goal is to make sure that it creates an inclusive environment where people feel that they belong, and it's a safe place for people to come and be who they are and succeed in our environment. So that's what I do, and I run that program for the global business.
Excellent. And I thought you were a great candidate to interview because coming from, the public school system and coming all the way through and doing the job that you do now, I thought it would be important for educators to hear maybe some of your thoughts about what it was like to be a young student and some of the things that you thought went well as a student, and maybe some things that maybe could have been a little bit different. So
yeah.
in order to kind of have like an organized experience, I'm going to ask you a few questions and
Okay.
we'll just see how this goes. Okay. So my first question is, can you tell us about your experience as a multilingual learner in the public school system? What do you remember? What are some of your first thoughts when you...
So my first thoughts about that were that I didn't understand anything people were teaching me or saying to me. So I couldn't absorb anything about what was being taught to me. And so, and I say that because my mother's an immigrant from Nicaragua. She moved here when she was 3. So she came here with my grandmother, who only spoke Spanish. And then my mother came here when she was 3 years old. And, by the time I was born, she was in high school. She had me very young. But because she was a young mother, she was in a special program where she'd go to school at night. And so I would stay with my grandmother, who only spoke Spanish. And so for me, Spanish was my first and only language, being born in Los Angeles, California. From there, I moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, which was really kind of middle America, and no one spoke Spanish. And so now I had to go into a school where they only spoke English. And so for me at that time, as a second, third grader, I would go into a special program. I think they call it special education today.
Okay.
And so I was part of a special education program that I would go into for two hours a day and learn how to say words and spell certain words through a program they used to call a Mr. Merlin back then. Mm-hmm. And I remember it being really tough for me because it made me feel like I was different from all the other kids. But I also remember that for Hispanic Heritage Month, I got to make a piñata and then brought it in for all the kids, right? And that was kind of an introduction to like the culture. Mm-hmm. But that's what I remember early on. It was just really tough understanding and seeing that I was one different from all the other kids. I had to go into a special program away from everyone else at a certain time. And so that made it really difficult. And then at the same time, not really understanding what was being taught to me because I just didn't understand it. So it was really, really tough early on.
Mm-hmm. Did your teacher speak Spanish when you went to that other classroom?
No.
Mm-hmm.
We had, they had an interpreter who would come in who was part of that special education program, mm-hmm. Who would help me. And then she would try her best to interpret the homework and the assignments for that day to me. But that's just, so there was really, I would go sit in a classroom and just there was no one who spoke Spanish. So I didn't really understand anything. It was just kind of just going through the day.
So when you were in that classroom, were you expected to be at the same level as your second or third grade peers?
So I realized that in third grade that I was. They expected me to do all the assignments, etc. And because I didn't understand what people were saying, what my teachers were teaching, I just didn't do my homework, and I would put it in my desk, and my desk would get really messy. And then the worst thing was my teachers then would dump my desk in front of the class and put it in a bag and make me take it home and get it signed. And, it was just, looking back now, it was, kind of a humiliating thing for a third grader, but, that's how it was. And so they were frustrated. I didn't know what was going on, and my parents were just angry because I would lie to them. Sometimes I would take my paperwork home, and it wasn't that I didn't want to get it signed. I just was scared that I was going to get in trouble for not doing my homework. So it was just kind of this like vicious circle of just something wasn't working. So so I did. In third grade, they expected me to be able to do my homework and deliver my work like everyone else.
So, yeah, that does sound pretty humiliating, all that whole situation. Did you find that, did you eventually find like peers that could support you? Or how did you come from like being a multilingual learner that didn't know much much English, and then kind of turn it so that you knew more and learned more? I mean, I know that it takes a long time to acquire English. So what was that experience like?
Yeah. So now go to fifth grade. And so by the time I got to fifth grade, I was already speaking better, English. Like I was understanding English more. My mother never spoke Spanish in the house. So we always, she always spoke English, and, and she, by the time she got to high school, she was knew English fairly well. So my dad and my mom spoke English. So I was forced to learn English there. So I picked up. So by the time I got to fifth grade, it wasn't like I was doing any better in school. I just, still information was difficult for me to absorb. But I remember, I'll never forget, Mrs. Jackson, a black teacher, who always seemed mean, right? But we would have spelling bees every Friday, and I was the first one out every single time. I'll never forget to this day. And so one day I went to her and I asked her if she can help me. Like I wanted to start winning the spelling bees. So what she ended up doing was she gave me all the words for that year, and we would sit after school, and she would teach me how to spell. She would take the time after school, walk me through. And she basically said, take the words home. Here's what they mean. Learn to spell them. And she would mark down, the next week of the words we would focus on that week. And I'll never forget to this day, just showing up one week and literally winning the entire spelling bee that week. And I'll never forget, the kids were just like stunned, like what just happened, right? But that was an actual incentive for me, because I loved winning, and I realized, wow, if I put the effort and somebody helped me finally, then I can really make this happen, right? Like I just got really motivated. And so I think that was a huge turning point for me. And then the other thing was, so that was fifth grade, going into sixth, seventh, middle school. The kids just started torturing me. I went into the middle school. And I was telling my dad this recently, and he never knew this, but the kids from a town not too far from the military base where we lived, they would bus them down to our school on base. And because I had an accent, and sometimes I couldn't pick up what they would say very quickly, they would call me every name in the book. And I remember just getting in fights in the locker rooms, kind of defending myself. But that was another motivator for me. It's just like, you know what, I don't want these kids to make fun of me. And so, because of my accent. And so that was the other motivator for me to just, I'd always ask my teachers to help me after school with, words and just, speaking better and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of how it all evolved.
Mm-hmm. That's a very powerful story, and I love how you kind of found motivation in yourself and finding things that you enjoyed, and were able to do that and surprise those kids. Yeah. That's a great story. I don't want to take too much time, so I want to ask you. I know that you saw some of these questions earlier. Did any of them speak to you that you might want to share? Or I don't want to go through a whole list.
Let's
There's
go
like
through
so
them.
many.
I read them today, but they're all good questions. I mean, I'll tell you, let's fast forward. I ended up getting my degree. I was so motivated that I ended up getting my undergrad in English and grammar and editing.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I was, my dad was in the Air Force, and he taught philosophy at the Air Force Academy. So he always read books, and he would make me read really difficult books that, I couldn't even understand, elementary school books, let alone reading, philosophy books. Mm-hmm. But, my parents would put me in special programs to learn how to make pictures of the things that I would read, right? Just to help me kind of visualize the words and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So, it didn't seem to work. It works now, but, fast forward through high school and college, and I ended up getting my degree in English. I don't have an accent like I used to. And by the time I got to college, it wasn't that I forgot Spanish, but I still had the pronunciation because it was my first language. I just chose to not deal with Spanish, so I didn't have the vocabulary that a lot of my Spanish friends did in college. So I was always very silent when we'd go out with my friends, and they just thought I was kind of, stuck up and whatnot. I just couldn't talk to them now in Spanish. Right now is the reverse. Mm-hmm. But you fast forward now, and I remember I was sitting at a City Year event, and you're familiar with City Year, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. And there was, and they'd asked me, because I was working at CBS, to be on the board of directors, and I just kept avoiding it because I wasn't sure about the program. And then this student comes up with one of the City Year kids, and they started talking about this kid who had made a dramatic turnaround that year. And the story was, let's just say the kid's name was Juan. He didn't understand what people were saying to him because Spanish or English wasn't his first language, so he would act up and get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's me, because that was how I wanted to get attention. I'd get in trouble a lot, right? Because that just and then the City Year student begins to tell the story of kind of the turnaround of the things that they did that year to help him, to motivate him to want to learn and focus on school. And what I heard in that 20-minute presentation was literally my entire life. They did it in a year, and I thought, wow, if I'd have had a City Year or, someone that could have helped me, where would I have gotten to earlier in life, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And so the point of that is that it's important to have people in your life that will understand the challenges that a lot of these multilingual learners are going through, because it's not easy. They don't understand a lot of things. They can't express their emotions. They can't express the challenges that are things that are happening personally. There's just a lot that they can't communicate, and so to get the attention that they desperately are looking for, sometimes they act up, and people think of that as just a really bad thing, when in reality they're just desperately looking to tell their story, right?
Yes.
And so I think the City Year example is just a great example of how, these kids are helping, getting in there into these schools and identifying the challenges and helping these kids get through that. And so, so I ended up getting on the board of City Year for a few years. It's just an amazing program. And I just think that's such one of those things that really helps and supports teachers in the public school system, right, in Providence. And those are great students that really help get in there and and help these kids kind of work their way through the system. So.
Very good, very nice. Yeah, I love that City Year program. When I was an ed coordinator back at a preschool a couple of years ago, we used to have a lot of City Year students come in and work with the students, and excellent program. Yeah, I hope that we get some programs like that in North Providence soon. But I wanted to thank you so much today for speaking with me and for sharing your story. I think it's an important story. I think it's really great to see someone that comes from the multilingual learner background, go through the process of the public school system, then go on to college, and then where you are today is wonderful. But it shouldn't be an amazing thing. It should be something that's accessible to everyone. Right. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me.
Awesome. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
awesome.
Right.
Thanks.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.